Okay. Well, I got in the shop here a little while ago and unclamped the piece we've been working on. And let me just get a couple of these clamps out of the way here. Whenever you work with green wood, one of the things you got to think about is, depending on how much moisture is in the wood, is going to affect how the wood is going to shrink and how it's going to move. So since we've been working with something that's very green, we have a lot of movement in the wood. What I noticed was the bottom was wanting to pull away from the center section of the chest here. So what I did was I went ahead and I just cut the bottom off, and I pulled the center plug out, which is what's here, and cleaned it up a little bit with a hand plane, just flatten it out. Basically, I started with a rasp and came along our surfaces here and really just kind of cleaned it up. Just got a nice smooth profile all the way around. And then I ran it through the router here to get a profile. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is with scratch stock, which I'm going to show you in a second here. One of the things to be careful of when you're running with a bearing, I cleaned this up really good, but on this side I had ended up with a little bit of chip, a little tear out here, and on this side, and I hadn't anticipated that as I was running this through the router, that bearing set high enough that it wanted to roll in there. Also, we have some checking from where the wood was seasoning. That's something to be aware of too. And so what I would do is I would go through here with some carving gouges and kind of clean this up a little bit. That's another thing I would do if I was doing it with scratch stock. We'll talk about that here in just a second. The top part that we use to clamp on, this is where we're going to be getting our handle out of. And then you can kind of see the lid. Now, one of the things that happened as it was shrinking was it was getting really tight here. I had a little trouble getting the plug out of the center. There was already a check at this end, and our glue seam actually came loose, and there's a lot of tension here. You can really feel this wanting to push in. So what I'll do is I'll end up re-gluing this back together when I get ready to glue it back on the base like we did last time. And so besides using your rasps on your edges here, you're also gonna really use those to smooth out your inside and your outside surfaces on all of the framework and the lid as well. And so let's take a look at how you would go about putting the moldings on the bottom if you weren't going to use a router. The easier way is a router if you have a profile you like. The other way to do it is if you have a piece. I just cut out a piece off the bottom of the plug just to kind of show you. Imagine this is a little bit larger, and what you would do is you would make some scratch stock, some scrapers that you would use along to create your profile. And so once you have this smoothed out here, get this here. You can see on this one we've got two different shapes going on, and one of the things I like to do is mark it out first and take some carving gouges, and we want to clean up a little bit of the bulk of that. You can also do it without the marking, without the carving gouges, but it just takes a little bit more work. And I think this is the one we want here. These are very simple to make. All I've done is take this particular one, just took an old Sawzall blade and a piece of hardwood, ground out my profile that I want here, this bead, with a little Dremel tool or angle grinder or whatever you have. You just don't want to heat it up too much as you're grinding it out. And then drill it, cut a slot with the bandsaw and put a couple screws through it to hold it in position so that you've got your distance set. You can see that all right. And this one is the same idea here. We've got it set for the larger profile. So whenever you're doing a curve shape, you can have a complex curve. You would be able to follow that curve along with these, whereas if you have a router bit, you can't always get in here. Like with this glued on first, you can't really get in here with the bearing the right way. It's easier to cut the profile either separately or with the scratch stock once it's already glued up, and you just clamp up your whole treasure chest in one piece. So we get our measurement here. So this will be their thicker profile, your thicker molding, and then you've got your thinner one. So we can cut a few carving gouges here. You can start out with like a number 15, a V tool, or we can take some small, like number 9s, which is a half circle. And that'll give you, you can see those all right. That'll give you a place to start here. So when this scratch stock is going to be coming in here, you can just come in with your tools and just get your line started. And think about which way the grain direction is going. Once I get to here, from this point, going this way, your grain's going to be coming out this way. But if I cut this direction on this end, it's going to want to tear that grain up. So really want to come up from the other direction. So I'm going to just come in here on this side a little bit first. Grab my mallet here. And just guide this down my be careful that you don't take too much material off, because when you get ready to use your scratch stock, it'll end up leaving a gap. So I'm just getting that groove started. There's a lot of material that gets taken off in that center section. You can also come in with a flat gouge and just kind of round it over a little bit here too, to get some of this bulk off. So once you're just going to kind of go back and forth a little bit between these different ones, make sure you have this lined up the right way, and you want to start leaning it a little bit of an angle. You don't necessarily want it straight up and down, because we want to kind of drag it until we get into the start of the cut. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of put pressure in on this side, and then I'm going to drag it uphill because this is the grain coming up this way. And you'll see it'll start pulling that. When you get to the end here on your end grain, it's going to be a little bit harder to do. So think about the direction of the grain. When you're coming down your end grain, you come off this end, you're going to want it's going to want to break out. So you want to come in from that end going this way. But coming off this way, it's not really going to matter. We're not going to have too much of an issue because of the direction of the grain going this way. And then once you kind of get it started, you can kind of lean it back the other way and just kind of get it going back and forth. Get this tighter here. So you see it's starting to take shape here a little bit. I might want to come in and take a little bit more material out. You also get this, it'll kind of get packed in there sometimes, your parts that you're coming off. So I can come back in here now, I can start seeing my shape taking form, and I actually want to turn it around the other way. Take a little bit more of this off my hand here. So you can see it's starting to take shape pretty nicely here on that one. Sometimes you get, kind of gets packed up in there. And go back through with your gouge and clean that out so that it doesn't clog your hole. If you've got a good bench, that makes a difference. Holding your work makes a big difference. But you don't need to have a good bench to do good work. You can just make do with what you have. Get this a little higher here. Stay. Want to be difficult on the end there. So again, I'll go back over here and just clean a little more out with this. Once you start getting it about filled in. You can switch to the other one. Okay. Where's the other one? Again, same thing. You want to kind of lean into it, going away from the grain on the downhill side, and start out easy. When you want to use harder wood, the softwoods doesn't work as well with scratch stocks. Nice thing too is you can really make it any shape you like, any profile, or if you're matching a historical profile. See here we got some of this here extra. My bead's a little wide for my scratch stock. It's also starting to burnish the wood a little bit, which is nice for when we get to the finishing stage. So I'm just going to come in here and take this extra off. Okay, so you're seeing it's starting to take shape, starting to look pretty similar here, and it's just going to take time to go through and really just keep working it until you get all those shapes smoothed out nicely. And you know, and then if you're cutting this before you glue it on, you can just glue it on after you get these cut. If it's already on there, then you just got to be careful. See, I came from this side so that I can be riding on the base. Otherwise I wouldn't have a fence really on this edge. So you just want to be careful you're not cutting into your front of your treasure chest there. So that's how to do the profiles if you use the scratch stock. If you use the router bit, same idea. Smooth out your surface as we talked about before. And you can come through, I'll probably come through with a like a number 9 carving gouge and kind of smooth up a couple of these spots here where we have some bumps from the tear out on the other side. But that's how to take care of that part. There's also on the lid you're going to want to put a little bit of a lip here as well. So what you want to do is again start with a smooth profile. Careful how you clamp this. If it's bent like that, you don't want to be spreading it across here and it's going to put too much pressure in the center. But gives us a nice smooth curve there. With this one, because of our curves this way and this way, what I've done is I've given a little bit of a round over, I don't know if you can see that, on both directions, here and here. You just want to make sure you keep it lined up right when you're working. Again, thinking about which direction the grain's going. So now our grain is going this way, and as it's cut back this way, we may need to drag it this direction, or maybe we can go that way. We'll kind of see what starts grabbing. But again, the same thing is you want to just kind of keep your fence on there and work your scratch stock back and forth. Once you've got your profiles on and you have your box glued up, you want to come back through and you want to get all these mill marks out. You want to kind of look at how your thickness is. You might want to clean that up a little bit. So a lot of work with the rasp works well. You can use a power sander with coarse sandpaper, really whatever works. But you want to be careful when you get to your edges. You don't want to roll over into your profiles that we just made. So just want to kind of take two hands and block on here. Piece of scrap here. A little piece of scrap. Just make sure it's thinner than where we're going to be going. Anyway, you'll slowly start to get those mill marks out. Like I said, you can use the coarse, like 80 grit sandpaper on a random orbit sander. You just want to work your way over the surfaces, evening their thickness and removing the bandsaw marks, because those will show up when you get ready to finish both sides. And just go over your surfaces inside and out. Just takes some time, but once you get it smooth as how you like it, then you can start prepping for the finish. Before we get into the finish, though, we'll need to make the handle for the lid. Here's the lid on that one. So here I've designed a little small handle for the lid here, and when you start out with this solid piece, that you're cutting out of here, this is where your material for your handle is going to be coming out of. Set this back in here. Another thing to think about, as your wood starts to dry and it starts to change a little bit, see, I'm getting a little bit of rocking there on the lid. So that's one of the things that we'll want to clean up when we clean up our surfaces. We want to get that lid to fit a little bit better, so that it's not giving us so much movement when it sits flat, and you just kind of work a little bit on this edge and work a little bit on this edge, and just keep checking it, fitting it back in and back and forth. So once you've got your everything filed down pretty good and sanded smooth, I've got a small little template, that you can cut out, screw or glue down with some contact adhesive to just a piece of MDF or a piece of masonite or something thin, some solid material that's not going to have too much movement. And then we're going to get this plug is going to come out of the center of this one. So we'll start with our reference point on the back, and we'll figure out where exactly that's going to be. But you can just imagine this inside of here. Now we've got a pretty large check on this one, so I may move it back just a little bit to get that out. So basically I'm just measured to make it about center this way and this way. If I go through, oops, let me turn this around. This is about, on this one, 1 3/4 inches from the back, and then you've got about 1 1/4 inch total thickness for the base of it. It's pretty close to square for what we have on our template, but I'm just going to go ahead and mark the other side as well. Okay, so you can see there's that check right in the center here, but if we look at the other side, it's not coming all the way through, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem for us, considering how thick this is. And we'll get our center line on here. Grab a tape measure. There's one. So we're right about 11 1/4. So 5 5/8, I believe. I can double check by measuring back the other way. Oh yeah, we did have a center line on there. It was just hard to see. Okay. We got our width of our template here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a fence. We're actually going to flip it over this way when we cut it out on the bandsaw, and so we can transcribe those lines to the other side if we want, so we can see where we're cutting. But it shouldn't really matter as long as we get a straight cut. Let's turn this way here. The advantage to having it on this side is that when we get to the chop saw to take that center block out, we can just lay it on the flat surface. If you can see this okay. There's our center line. can double check with my template too and just see how close I am. It looks pretty good. So we're basically just taking this chunk right out of the center. Now the thickness of this is not going to be, actually this one might be big enough. On this one it wasn't thick enough, and I actually had to cut another piece off the side here, flip it over and glue it on to give me a little bit thicker. But this one looks like this actually would be big enough to take out of there, so that's good. But if not, you just cut another piece off, flip it over and glue it on there to give you your height. Or if you want to adjust your design on the handle a little bit. So let's take this over the bandsaw, we'll cut this out and start going on some of the details on that. We've got these cut out here, and basically just one cut here and then one cut here on the bandsaw. Take that, go turn it this way, chop saw, hand saw, whatever you like to use. That gives us our centerpiece. Now this has all been smoothed out, and basically what we're doing is we're just going to glue this back on the same orientation it came off originally. And so if you were to just reassemble this, this gives you your positioning, or pretty darn close to it, and you can transfer your layout lines. If you go this way, if you can see that right. Just put them on light because you don't want to have to sand them off again or file them off. Rasp. And here's our distance from the back. Turn this around this way so you can see. You can double check with this and see if we're pretty close. Looks like it's off a little bit. Let me go this. Okay. So when we're done making the handle, this will actually just get glued right on here, right back where it came off of originally. It gives you an idea, you know, what you're going to end up looking like here. So I got this flipped around the other way though. This way. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we've got that cut out. We're going to mark out our layout on here. And you just want to take your template, get it lined up there. Now your bottom is curved, so just match your corners up and get it centered. You could even draw a center line this way if you wanted to. We're at about not quite 1 5/8, so get my center here. Turn those two lines to center. I'm just gonna center line, okay. Lay this on here, and we're just gonna trace it once we get it centered. Just keep your pressure so you don't lose your spot. And you get a nice fine pencil. You can always adjust your design a little bit too, based on your carving gouges or your files or whatever you want this to look like, to make it a little easier for you as you are actually making it. Okay, so that's giving me just basically an outline from this perspective. If I turn it this way, it's not going to, the top part won't be the same, but the base will be basically the same. A little bit narrower this way, so I'm just going to kind of center it here and trace the bottom half to give me where it goes. Okay, so you can see your lines meet up here at the corner. And this part here will just be it'll just be a straight flat thickness. You can see how this is from this angle. So next thing you're going to do is you're going to go take a drill bit and drill through these 3 holes. They're pierced at the center. Then we're going to take a 1/16 inch bandsaw blade or even 1/8 inch, and we're going to come in and we're going to make these cuts on here. But we're not going to cut all the way through, because if we take this cut all the way up, then we're going to lose this whole piece, which shows us our layout line. So we want to kind of leave the pieces connected as best we can until we get almost all the cuts done. And then at the end, then we'll just go through and separate the cuts. Grab this real quick here. So here's the back from this one when this was cut out. You can kind of see the thickness that came off the other side, but this gives you an idea. You know, the next step, you just drill this out and you've cut through around these different areas here. Once you've got this all separated out to where you have your solid piece, that's when you're going to start working on some of your carving, some of your details. You can take needle files, you can take some really small gouges and just clamp this bottom square stock piece and work your details in here. I didn't put as much on the back side because you're not really going to see that as much. And you can use like a 9 or a shallower, and then maybe you can take some rasps, different files that you have different profiles, and that'll give you your curves here on these lower sections. And you can also clean up some of these curves on these with those rasps. You can take little rifflers, get into some of the details. Also needle files for these really tiny spots. Once you've got the carving how you like it, then it's just a matter of taking it and gluing it in the center here. It doesn't. You don't really need to clamp it. You just need to put some good glue on there and get it centered. Get it centered here. Give it a little press, and then just leave it overnight till it sets up. And then at that point, you're pretty much ready to start finishing. Okay, so let's talk about finishing a little bit here. On this piece, we're going to just do a wax finish. I've got a few burnishers here, a polissoir. This is made by Don Williams. You can buy these. And it's basically just a corn broom. It's like a broom handle. And you soak it in melted beeswax. I made some little handmade ones here. Just took an old cheap broom I bought for $5 and wrapped some wire around it. And you can cut these to different shapes. And I've got some hardwood. This is hickory, beech. Just some little points I made for burnishing. Here we've got the, this is just Butcher's amber paste wax. And I've used a combination between the paste wax and the beeswax for the finish here. When you're prepping for your finish, it's several steps, the process. Obviously you're going to go through, like we talked about with the rasp sandpaper. You're going to smooth all your mill marks out, and you're going to go increasingly finer and finer so you get it really smooth, getting into all the moldings with your sandpaper, with your burnisher. Eventually, once we get to the wax stage, I'm going to show you here. These are the two that we were talking about with the router and with the scratch stock, and this is the finished piece. You can see how rough this is here. This is a little bit smoother. These haven't been prepped for finish at all. These are just rough, getting roughed in. But once you've got that scratch stock or that router bit where it's just giving you a smooth, perfect profile, then it's just a matter of going back through with the sandpaper. Again, you might start with 60 or 80 grit real coarse, and then work your way finer to 100 grit or 120. You don't need to go too fine because we're actually burnishing and filling the pores with the wax. So on this one, you can see the sheen level. I've done the lid already. I don't know if you can kind of see how that sheen level is and the color. But basically what we're doing is we're just taking the pores of the wood. We're taking some beeswax, rubbing it on there, getting it, just grinding it into the grain. And take your burnisher, and you're just going to work it at kind of a, you can go with the grain, or you can go slightly askew from the grain. And you're just basically rubbing that wax into the pores of the wood and melting it down as it heats up. You can go different directions, but generally the direction of the grain is where you want to go. Use my finger as a guide here on the edge so I don't round it over. This will give you a good little workout too. You don't need to go to the gym when you're hand finishing like this. You'll see it starting to bring up a little bit of a sheen increase here. You can also come in with your paste wax, which is a softer wax. Also, you can go the other direction, whereas the beeswax is kind of a moderately dense material. The paste wax is very soft material, and it's going to dry. It's not going to be as durable. You can go the other direction and go with paraffin or other types of waxes. You can also color the waxes if you want to put some like ground artist pigment or some universal tinting colors. Any kind of ground pigment you can mix in with the wax if you melt it down molten. You can use that for filling if you want to do a colored wax to fill, or if you want to tint the overall whole tone of the wood. In this case, this wax is an amber color. We're just going to wipe it on there. Same idea as before, we're just working it into the pores of the wood. You can flip-flop back and forth, go back to your burnisher, work that in there. And this is just burnishing the fibers, pushing down the fibers of the wood, melting the wax, filling the pores. At this point, it's still not that shiny, but Once you start let it dry a little bit, come back in with your soft cotton cloth and start buffing it a little, you'll just see that sheen level just really start popping out. And you can see the difference here between the two halves. So from this angle, this part is the part that I've buffed and this part I haven't. You can kind of start to see that change in the sheen as you rotate it. Go ahead and buff this other side a little bit here too. And turn your cloth frequently. Now it's really starting to come out. Really starting to look nice. Just brings out that beautiful yellow color of the mulberry. That's your flat surfaces. When you get into these moldings here, you can take your little homemade broomstick pieces and get a little wax. You can just get in those grooves with that wax and just burnish those fibers down. This is where the prep makes a big difference when you're getting ready for this stage while you're sanding and you're filing. Just really getting those moldings smooth out. You can also get in there with just a corner of this, fold it up real tight. Some of this paste wax. And you just work your way around until you've done the whole surface. You can use the flat one here on this round molding. Again, use my finger as a guide. Just kind of get in there. Slowly change my angle. Back to the cotton cloth. Just get it tucked down in there so we don't leave a lot of wax in your cracks. And just buff it until you get that sheen up. Keep turning your cloth. And there you have it. That nice even sheen on the lid in the front. You can kind of compare and see which is shinier. Do I need to do a little bit more here on this surface to match my sheen level on this surface? Once you've done the inside and the outside, the entire treasure chest, your final finishing touch that I like to do is I've cut out a piece of fur here, glued it to a piece of MDF hardboard, masonite on the back, and you just make an insert that you cut off the bottom of your block that came out of here. Just get a nice fur insert to fit inside the bottom there. Just give it a real touch of class. And there you have it. Nice little treasure chest. It started out as a piece of firewood, and now you've got a beautiful little treasure chest.